you to picture a clock, but not, the one on your wall or your phone. Picture a countdown where you can't see the digits, but you can feel them ticking down in your gut. And when it hits 0, it's not just your time that's up. It's that time itself is up for everyone.
That is a terrifying image to start with, but honestly, it's really the only way to accurately frame what we're talking about today.
We are zooming in on a very specific window. 13 minutes.
Just 13 minutes.
Yeah. Less time than it takes to commute to work or, fold a load of laundry.
It's a heartbeat in the grand scheme of history.
Exactly. But the research we're diving into today argues that there was this specific window, those 13 minutes, where the world was closer to nuclear incineration than it has ever been before, or honestly, ever been since.
And here's the thing that's so chilling about it.
No speeches.
No speeches. No grand declarations from the Oval Office. No, banging shoes on the table at the UN.
No air raid sirens wailing in the streets of New York or Moscow. Just a specific patch of ocean, a metal tube, and total, absolute silence.
And that silence is what makes this deep dive so scary. We're conditioned to think of history as these loud, explosive moments, battles, riots, rallies.
Right.
But when you actually look at the logs, the transcripts of declassified files, the scariest moment in human history was defined by how quiet it was.
So let's set the board here. We're going back to October 1962, the Cold War.
Which was rapidly becoming hot.
You've got American U-2 reconnaissance planes flying high altitude over Cuba. They bring back film, the analysts break out the magnifying glasses, and they spot something that effectively stops hearts in Washington.
Soviet nuclear missiles. And we have to stress the geography here because that's the real catalyst. We are talking about Cuba.
90 miles from the coast of Florida.
Just 90 miles.
It's nothing. A jet covers that in minutes.
In the context of ballistic missiles, 90 miles, it's instantaneous. It's point-blank range.
So what does that actually mean for, response time?
It meant the warning time for a nuclear strike on Washington, D.C. went from about 30 minutes if the missiles came from Russia to about 5.
5 minutes? You can't even evacuate the White House in 5 minutes.
Not even close, let alone a city. And that's why historians refer to the mood in the White House not as panic, but as paralysis. You look at the ExComm transcripts, that's the Executive Committee of the National Security Council, and it wasn't chaotic shouting. It was this heavy, suffocating realization that the game was over.
Because they were trapped. I was looking at the options they had on the table, and it's like one of those choose-your-own-adventure books where every single page ends in, you die.
That's a grim but very accurate way to put it.
Okay, let's break them down. Option 1, do nothing. Just accept it.
Which was politically impossible for Kennedy. I mean, he'd be impeached.
Yeah.
But more importantly, from a national security standpoint, it just completely destabilized the global balance of power.
You have a loaded gun.
You effectively have a loaded gun pressed against America's temple 24/7.
Okay, so doing nothing is out. Option 2, a surgical airstrike. Just, blow the sites up before they're operational.
Sounds decisive on paper, right?
Yeah.
The generals love this option. But think about the fallout. You are bombing Soviet assets. You are killing Soviet technicians and soldiers.
Khrushchev can't let that slide.
He can't. He has to retaliate. Maybe he takes West Berlin. Maybe he fires a missile at Turkey. And then NATO responds, and suddenly you're in World War III.
So that's out. Then option 3, full-scale invasion. Boots on the ground in Cuba.
Which guarantees war.
Yeah.
The Soviets had tactical nuclear weapons on the island already, something the Americans didn't fully realize at the time.
Wow.
An invasion force would have been vaporized on the beach, and the nuclear exchange would have started immediately.
So you have 3 doors, and behind all 3 doors is a mushroom cloud.
Exactly. As one of the historians put it, there was no safe path, only different speeds toward disaster.
Different speeds toward disaster. That really sticks with you. So you're Kennedy. You're sitting there, the clock is ticking, the missiles are getting ready. What do?
You invented fourth door.
You try to change the language of the conflict.
This is where the diplomacy gets incredibly semantic, but it's absolutely crucial. Kennedy needed a way to stop the flow of weapons without technically pulling the trigger on a war.
Which brings us to the quarantine.
Right.
Now, if you look at the military maneuvers, this was a blockade. I mean, they put a ring of Navy ships around Cuba and said, nothing gets past.
It was a blockade.
But there's a massive legal problem with that word blockade, isn't there?
A huge one. Under international law, a blockade is an act of war. If Kennedy goes on TV and says, we are blockading Cuba, He's effectively declaring war on the Soviet Union.
So he breaks out the thesaurus?
Essentially, yes. He calls it a quarantine.
Which sounds medical, like you're isolating a sick patient.
Precisely. It sounds defensive. It sounds protective. It doesn't sound like an invasion. He defines it as a measure to stop offensive weapons. It allowed the Soviets just a tiny bit of wiggle room to save face.
So it wasn't an act of war, it was a safety inspection.
A safety inspection, exactly.
But let's be real, did the Soviets actually buy that distinction?
Publicly, no, they called it piracy. They were furious. But privately, Khrushchev needed an out just as much as Kennedy did. The term quarantine gave him just enough space to think before shooting.
So the U.S. Navy draws this line in the water, this massive circle around the island, and now you have Soviet cargo ships steaming right toward that line.
And this is the setup for those 13 minutes we talked about at the top. Imagine the visual. You have the might of the U.S. Navy aircraft carriers, destroyers just sitting there. You have Soviet ships approaching.
And the entire world is watching the clock.
This is that moment you always see in the movies, the big staring contest.
Yeah.
The Soviet ships get closer and closer. The American commanders are waiting for the order to fire if they cross the line. The tension is just unbearable. And
they stop.
They stop.
But they don't turn around right away. They just, go dead in the water?
They slow down, they hesitate, and for 13 minutes, there is absolute silence. No radio chatter, no explanation from Moscow. Just these massive ships drifting.
And think about the sailors on the American ships. They don't know about any back-channel diplomacy. They're just staring at the horizon, fingers on triggers, wondering if the next sound they hear is going to be radio static.
Or the end of the world.
Yeah.
That phrase, the end of history.
Yeah.
It wasn't hyperbole back then. If those ships had crossed, the U.S. would have fired. If the U.S. fired, Soviets launch. It was that close.
But, and this is where the story pivots into something much, much darker, while everyone was fixated on those ships on the surface. The real danger wasn't visible at all.
No. The surface ships were almost a distraction, in a way. The real trigger for World War III was hundreds of feet underwater.
This is the part that just blows my mind because it's so often a footnote in the textbooks. But looking at the declassified accounts from the Soviet archives, this was the main event.
This was it.
We need to talk about the submarine B-59.
The B-59, one of 4 Soviet Foxtrot-class submarines sent to the Caribbean. And we really need to destroy the Hollywood image of a submarine here. This wasn't the hunt for Red October with, Sean Connery looking cool in a turtleneck.
No, the conditions they describe in the logs sound like literal hell.
It was a nightmare. These subs were built for the Arctic, not the tropical Caribbean. The air conditioning has failed days ago.
Oh, God.
The temperature inside the sub was hovering between 45 and 50 degrees Celsius.
That's like 120 degrees Fahrenheit.
In a metal tube. Men were fainting from heat stroke while manning their posts. They had a skin rash spreading through the crew because of the humidity. They were rationing water to half a glass a day.
And the air quality must have been
toxic. They hadn't surfaced to recharge batteries or ventilate in days because the Americans were hunting them. Carbon dioxide levels were dangerously high.
So they were essentially drunk on bad air.
Pretty much. Their cognitive function was dropping. They were exhausted, dehydrated, and suffocating.
And on top of that physical torture, they are completely cut off.
Total information blackout. They are too deep for radio contact. They haven't heard from Moscow. They don't know about the quarantine. They don't know if negotiations are happening or if Washington is already a radioactive crater.
They're operating in a complete vacuum, and then the explosions start.
Right. An American destroyer group locates the B-59, and they want to force it to surface to identify itself. So they start dropping depth charges.
Now, this is a really critical technical detail. The Americans were using signaling charges.
Right, like practice grenades.
They were just meant to be loud and annoying, to bang on the hull and say, hey, we know you're there, come up.
But the Americans never told the Soviets that was the protocol. So to the crew, inside the B-59, huddled in the dark, sweating, unable to breathe, those didn't sound like hello. They sounded like attacks.
I mean, can you imagine being in that metal drum? Blam! The hull shakes. The lights flicker. Blam! Another one closer. You don't think, oh, they just want to chat.
No, you think they are trying to kill us. And because they had no contact with Moscow, the captain of the B-59, Valentin Savitsky, he draws the only logical conclusion available to him. He screams, "The war has started."
He thinks the shooting has already begun up top.
He believes the Soviet Union is likely already under attack, maybe destroyed. He decides he is not going to die shamefully in a metal coffin. He's going to take the enemy with him.
And this isn't just any torpedo he wants to fire.
No, this T-59 was carrying a special weapon, a nuclear torpedo.
How big?
The yield was roughly the size of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima.
And he orders it to be loaded.
He orders the launch. He screams at the crew to prepare the weapon. The target is the aircraft carrier USS Randolph, which is leading the task force.
So if he fires that torpedo,
it vaporizes the aircraft carrier and probably several destroyers. The Americans instantly retaliate with nuclear depth charges. The U.S. assumes it's a coordinated first strike, so they launch their ICBMs at Moscow. Moscow launches back. The world ends. It's that simple.
So Savitsky yells fire. The political officer on board, Ivan Maslenikov, he says yes.
The political officer agrees. He's just as scared, just as convinced the war is on. So that's 2 votes. Yes.
But this is where the command structure gets weird, right? Because usually a captain is God on his boat. If the captain says fire, you fire.
Correct.
But on this specific boat, on this specific day, there was a third man.
Yes. Vasily Arkhipov.
And he wasn't just some junior officer?
No, and this is the detail that saves the world.
Yeah.
Arkhipov was the chief of staff of the entire submarine brigade. He was the commodore. He just happened to be riding on the B-59 to observe.
Then because of his rank?
He was technically an equal to the captain. On any other submarine in that fleet, the captain's order would have been final.
So if Arkhipov had been on the B-4 or the B-36?
The torpedo would have launched. But because he was on the B-59, the launch required unanimous consent from all 3 senior officers: Savitsky, Maslenikov, and Arkhipov.
So you have 2 men screaming to fire, the captain is losing it, the crew is terrified. And Arkhipov, what does he do?
By all accounts, he steps into that chaos and he just brings the temperature down.
Yeah.
He doesn't scream back. He doesn't quote regulations. He questions the narrative.
He questions the certainty.
He looks at the captain and effectively says, "We don't know." He argues that the explosions are rhythmic, that they're signaling charges, not destruction charges. He says, if they wanted to kill us, we'd be dead already.
That takes an insane amount of courage. To stand there with alarms blaring and your commanding officer screaming that you're a traitor or a coward and just say, wait.
It's the hardest thing a soldier can do. It's easy to follow orders. It's easy to fight back when you're attacked. It is incredibly difficult to do nothing when your instincts are screaming for action.
And the captain pushed back, right? This wasn't easy.
Oh, Savitsky was furious. He recordedly felt that surfacing without firing would be a disgrace to the Soviet Navy. But Arkhipov stood his ground. He refused to turn his key. He refused to authorize the launch.
And because it had to be unanimous,
the torpedo stayed in the tube.
Just like that. The B-59 surfaced. They signaled the Americans who had absolutely no idea they had almost been vaporized. They didn't fire. The submarine turned around and went home.
And the world kept turning. People in New York and London and Moscow went to work, complained about the weather, tucked their kids in, completely oblivious to the fact that they owed their lives to one Russian naval officer who decided to be stubborn.
It really reframes the whole idea of safety, doesn't it?
Completely. We love to talk about the system. We have treaties, red phones, fail-safes, protocols. We want to believe that nuclear war is prevented by sophisticated game theory and rational actors.
But in this case, the system failed.
The system did exactly what it was designed to do, and that was the problem. The protocol said, if attacked, retaliate. The information they had suggested they were attacked, the logic dictated a launch.
So the machinery of war was working perfectly. It was just driving them right off the cliff.
Exactly. The only thing that stopped the machine was a human factor.
Here.
A glitch in the software. It was one man's intuition, his doubt, his conscience.
It's the value of hesitation. I mean, we live in a world that worships speed, move fast and break things. He who hesitates is lost. But here, hesitation saved the human race.
It creates this fascinating paradox. We often view indecision as a weakness. But Arkhipov showed that the ability to pause, to sit in that uncomfortable uncertainty and say, I need more proof, is actually the ultimate strength.
It makes you look at modern technology a little differently, too.
How so?
Well, we're rushing toward automated defense systems, AI-controlled responses, hypersonic missiles that require instant decisions. We're trying to build systems that react faster than humans ever could.
That's a chilling thought. Because if Arkhipov had been an algorithm, if the B-59 had been run by an AI program,
it would have analyzed the depth charges, categorized them as an attack based on the acoustic profile, calculated the probability of destruction, and fired the torpedo within seconds.
an AI wouldn't have hesitated.
No, it wouldn't have had a gut feeling that The Americans were just signaling.
You're right. The slowness of the human being, the friction of human doubt, that was the only safety feature that actually worked. And if we remove that friction, if we automate the apocalypse, we lose the only thing that saved us in 1962.
It is terrifying to think that our survival, even today, might just hang on whether the person with the button is a decent human being who's willing to break the rules.
And that's the provocative thought I'd want to leave you with. We got lucky. We had an Archipoff. But next time, the person in that room might not hesitate. The person in that room might be more like Captain Savitsky, sure of themselves, ideologically driven, ready to be a hero.
And if that person doesn't hesitate,
then the silence doesn't last, and we don't get a sequel to this conversation.
well, that is heavy to think about, but necessary.
Safety is not a guarantee. It's a daily practice of restraint.
Now look, this deep dive has been about hesitation born of conscience. It's about a man who stopped the gears of war because he wanted to be sure.
But that's not the only reason people hesitate.
Right. The research for our next deep dive is already looking wild. We're going to look at another night, another close call where the world almost ended.
But in that story, the hesitation didn't come from a place of moral courage or calm rationality.
No, it came from pure, unadulterated fear.
Fear is something worse than the enemy.
So hit that follow button and tune in for the next deep dive. Because sometimes the world isn't saved by the good guys.
Sometimes it's saved by the sheer terror of what happens next.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Stay curious, and maybe take a second before you react.
We'll see you next time.